Chapter 61:28. Elaine said with a rare shyness, "Oh, I'm embarrassed for you to say it." After that, Elaine said again, "Today I still have to buy groceries and cook for my daughter. Let's do this. Tomorrow morning I will take off all the cuckolds hanging on the balcony and throw them away. I won't be angry with Noah anymore." Jacob said in surprise, "Really, wife, your change is a bit fast. I can't adapt to it for a while." Elaine waved her hand. "Hey, actually I have wanted to throw away those cuckolds. It really doesn't look good hanging on the balcony. But I was still a little angry in my heart before, so I didn't pick them away. Since you said, don't be like them in the future, I won't be angry anymore and I can remove them." Jacob sighed sincerely. "Wife, you really impress me." On the way, Charlie's family drove to the supermarket. Peter, who had traveled to North America and Europe, finally arrived in Orris Hill. This time he came to China with a Nordic passport. After arriving in China, he could continue to use the previous identity of Zhu Liangyun. Charlie had asked Ethan, who had great eyes and hands, to help him solve the domestic identity problem. He made previously Peter's fake identity has been completely turned into a real and verifiable file. After arriving in Orris Hill, he only needs to find a police station to report the loss of his ID card. And he can get his new ID document in a few days. Peter walked out of Orris Hill Airport with mixed feelings. He had previously declined Charlie's offer to pick him up. On the one hand, he did not want to cause him any trouble. And on the other hand, he also hoped that he could start over in Orris Hill without leaving any hidden dangers. So, he immediately stopped a taxi and headed to Orris Hill Antique Street, intending to revisit his old place. He is not from Orris Hill and has been living overseas since he was a child. In order to bring the 9 mysterious heavenly scriptures to Charlie, he came to Orris Hill to live for a while, and he is quite familiar with Orris Hill now. The most familiar thing among them is naturally his work at Antique Street. Moreover, his resume as Liangyun was all related to the antique industry. So his current idea is to go back to the Antique Street first. Find a place to stay in the Antique Street, and go to the Antique Street to find an area early this morning. A small shop with a modest price, he will start his own business in Orris Hill. After the taxi arrived at Antique Street, he first went to the police station next to Antique Street, where he filled in his identity information, performed facial recognition, and obtained a replacement legal document for his identity. Then the police station issued him a temporary ID card, so that he can check into the hotel normally in Orris Hill. After coming out of the police station, it was almost time to get off work in the Antique Street. So he directly carried his bag and walked around the Antique Street. The environment here is no different from when he left. But he didn't expect to come back when he left last time. Not long after he entered the Antique Street, a hawker recognized him and said in surprise, "Oh, isn't this the manager Zhu from Antique Store before? When did you come back?" The environment of the Antique Street has not changed much. The business situation has not changed. Antique Store is still the largest store in Antique Street. When Peter was able to become the manager of the Antique Store, most people who made a living in Antique Street knew him. He no longer remembered who the hawker was. But when he saw that the other party recognized him, he said very politely, "Hello, I just returned to Orris Hill." The hawker nodded and asked in a gossipy low voice, "Manager Zhu, if I remember correctly, you should have been fired by Miss Song, right?" Peter did not feel embarrassed, nodded slightly, and said calmly, "Yes, I made some mistakes in business at that time, and was fired by Miss Song." The vendor said hurriedly, "The Miss Song now is not the Miss Song back then. The Miss Song back then was just the person in charge of the Antique Store. But now she is the head of the entire Song family. When you come back this time, don't let Miss Song know, otherwise she might cause trouble for you." Peter smiled and said, "Although I was fired by Miss Song before, it was just a work problem. There is no other conflict between me and her. I think she probably doesn't remember me." After that, Peter added, to be honest, Mr. Jew returned to Orris Hill this time because he wanted to find a shop in the antique street and start a small business of his own. If brother knows any good shops for sale, you might as well recommend them to me. The hawker shrugged. The business in the antique street is getting harder and harder now. I remember that you seemed to be from Panjiayuan. At that time, you probably opened a shop selling antiques in Panjiayuan, right? Why are you thinking of coming to Orris Hill now? Isn't this going backward the more you work? When Peter applied for the job as manager of the antique store, his resume mentioned that he had started setting up stalls in Panjiayuan more than 20 years ago. At that time, many small vendors in Orris Hill Antique Street felt that he is a great deal. So his background and resume are spread word of mouth.